The number you have dialed has been changed. The new number is... Please note, the new number is...
Hello and welcome once again to our talk with Pastor Andrew, that's me, here at Resurrection in Rochester, and Pastor Jeff.
That's me.
Yeah, that's right. Serving in Ohio. This week, this is exciting because we've been asking with all of these at the end, we got some feedback. So I thought it was an interesting idea. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about joy. Joy in this pandemic, divided world that we live in. So Jeff said he had some wonderful wisdom to impart on us as we get this discussion going. And I once again thank you all for taking the time to watch this.
Yeah. So I'm going to start off by saying a few things. One, you're going to want to get your pens or pencils and pads of paper.
Whoa.
Because I'm about to drop some life knowledge on you. Not really. But then also, I want to say thank you to Pastor Andrew because when we first started meeting, he would say, "This is Pastor Jeff from Avon Lake, Ohio." And then he got a little bit lazier with it, and he'd be like, "Yeah, from like Cleveland, Ohio." And now I'm just from Ohio. So I'm expecting next week to just be Pastor Jeff, who's a pastor, I think. It's gonna be really generic, which I appreciate. That brings
I received joy from that, what you just said.
Me too. All right. So joy. So I'm going to speak, obviously, as we've done in the past, only for myself. I don't want to generalize for other pastors, but for myself, as a pastor, I'd like to think when people interact with me, they get a certain sense of joy that I try to bring happiness, to other people and make things fun. That's my personality. And so I think sometimes people might be actually a little surprised that even though that's the case in interactions, that when I'm just with myself, if I'm by myself or, I'm doing reflection or what have you, joy is not something that just naturally comes to me. It's not something like I just sit around and, smile all the time, and I have had, which is, I think, ironic because I've had times because of my personality where someone will ask me, like, "Are you doing okay today? Are you feeling okay?" And I'll say, "Yeah, why?" And they'll go, "Oh, well, you're not smiling. You're usually smiling." So for me, coming across to other people, not smiling is me having a bad day. But personally, yeah, there's a lot of times, a lot of situations where joy for me is not an automatic. I will say, to kind of open this up, I think a lot of the lack of joy that I experience at times in life finds its source in me. Like for my own head. I'm very judgmental of myself. I'm very hard on myself as far as what I expect to be like and what I expect to be able to do. And so there's a lot of times, where self-deprecation comes natural to me and kind of putting myself down in my own mind comes natural to me. And when you're in that kind of mindset, that can make joy a difficult thing to find. And so I would say the initial place where I find joy is when I'm spending time with people that I care about. That's where I find joy. That I have to find it outside of myself because it doesn't just naturally just spring from me. I know that sounds kind of dark and depressing, and I feel even kind of weird and sad saying that, as a pastor and in a public ministry, but that's a reality, with all the stress just of regular life, family, work, then you add in just what's going on in society, especially now. It takes some effort to say, where can I find the joy in this? So I will say initially, the joy that I find comes from places outside of myself, and I have to kind of harness that if I want to keep it, in here. So I'm going to kind of throw something back to you, a slight twist on the idea or the conversation. So pastors get asked this sometimes, at least I have, by like my bishop. I've been asked this, if I go to like a clergy conference. I'm pretty sure after we did our internships, Andrew and I going to the same seminary, the woman who kind of went over and supervised the seminarians' internships, one of the things they would ask is, where do you find, I think she would say, like, where does your heart sing in this? And where does your heart cry? Or like, where do you find joy in this experience? Where do you find a struggle? I also remember, so if he ever actually watched this, the way my memory works, I remember one of our friends, one of our seminary friends, Jim, the Right Reverend James Pike. We had a new seminary president when we started seminary, and one of the first times I remember being around the seminary presidents, I remember Jim asking the president, "Hey, so what about being president of the seminary?" So he was even using that kind of language. So if I'm asking that, that's been asked to me, I'll put that out there just so we can, kind of build off of it in the professional sense. Where do you find joy in being a pastor? Like, what parts about being a pastor do you say, man, these are the things, this is what makes it easier to get through the other stuff we have to deal with?
So you're asking me.
Well, yeah. So Andrew,
throw it back over.
Where I'm going to throw it back over to you. Where do you, I know how I would answer that, and so you can throw it back to me after you do. But I was just, where do you, what parts of ministry do you find joy in?
Well, let me take a step back.
You do that. If you could avoid my questions.
No, let me just take a step back, because something that I've had to do, and it's been hard my whole life because I've constantly heard it from people, is a lot of times because I'm also my own worst critic, which I think a lot of people can connect with. But, I'm my own worst critic, so sometimes when I'm in the midst of, I don't want to say feeling down, but not up, I have to say, maybe I do like a daily review, like even like one of those things, and it sounds, I can't think of the right word. It sounds
cheesy or cliche.
Yeah, it sounds cheesy or, yeah, thank you. You wake up and it's like, what am I going to find joy in today? Or when I go to bed, to say, what did I find joy in today? Or when I'm sitting here at my desk and I'm like, is there something I can be joyful about? Like just that mental 2 or 3 minute break to just do that.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to ministry, because and I do that because joy it's just not there at the forefront for me. It's not something I have to like mentally connect with that or try and find a connection with that sometimes.
Yeah.
But in terms of being a pastor, and as an introvert, I mean, it still sounds kind of strange. I find joy, as you were talking about, like in connections with people. It's joyful to have those connections and, in a sense, those relationships and building those relationships. But then as an introvert, it's also extremely draining, not in a bad way. It just, because I'm putting myself out there. And for the first few years of ordained ministry, I didn't share with people. Sunday mornings are extremely draining for me, not just because I'm up there preaching or doing whatever. It's that interaction, because that takes more energy for me. And I think other introverts, and I hope they understand that. So, but I find joy in that, but at the same time, it's taxing on me. And, right now that is something I miss, but a lot of times I don't realize that I miss it. So like in this time I've done a few, I'll just call them like lawn calls or whatever, where it's like I'll stop at someone's house, I'm at the end of their driveway, and we just kind of have a conversation, which is what we need to do, And I've also called people, but it's almost like I don't realize what that means to me until after. And I find and I do find joy in that. And I'll go home and I'll tell my wife Katie about it, and I'll just be talking about it, and she's like, "Wow, you're talking about this a lot." So I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm joyful about that." So there's that, and then also, after 15 years, for the majority of it, and I can't even believe that this is a part of it, but I do enjoy and find joy in writing sermons and then preaching, which is totally to this day, I cannot understand because, as I have told people from the beginning, I'm deathly afraid of public speaking, which is why maybe I said this here, but I've said it elsewhere. When I came to Resurrection here in Rochester, they moved. They have in the worship the peace, sharing of the peace isn't like 3/4 of the way through the service. It's right. It's right after the greeting.
Okay.
And so one of my biggest worries is because I'll get up and I do announcements at the beginning of the service.
Right.
Doing announcements, that's public speaking. So my hands get super sweaty because I'm so nervous. So then it's like, all right, so I have to do this, and now we're going to go share the peace. Of course, right now that's not a reality of physically sharing the peace like that. But you know what I found is it actually helped to. I've actually found comfort in that being there, and I really like it. Because, but I'm kind of rambling about that. But yeah, I mean, just in those things, I find joy, and it sounds even to this day, it sounds a bit strange. But in those, I don't even know. See, it sounds so strange. It's more of a humbling than joy, but there's joy in those parts of ministry where families, people welcome me into those times of great vulnerability in terms of visiting someone in the hospital where maybe they're in hospice, or being there with the family when someone's life is coming to an end. But then also not only the pastor baptizing a child or whomever, but being a part of that preparation and just having those conversations and having those one-on-ones. Again, I think that's part of building a relationship, a first communion or
those life-changing moments.
Yeah,
life-changing moments. Yeah.
Those faith-defining moments, in a sense, you know, and to be a part of that, because it's in those anymore that I go where I might say, wow, this is what a humbling place to be. Yeah. And I think that humbleness that turns to joy because it's a gift.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think that's really good. And I think and I want to say doing a minimal amount, a little bit of research on this topic, since it wasn't natural necessarily for either one of us. A little bit of research on this topic prior to starting the video. That is one of the things. So I won't be the first to admit it. I'm going to admit that there's a lot of stuff that Martin Luther says that I'm like, that's amazing. And then there's some stuff that he says usually towards the end of his life where I'm like, can we just not talk about that stuff? But he kind of hit it. And one of the things I read in getting ready for this, that joy isn't just, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, joy isn't just the times of happiness. Joy is in that vulnerability. Joy is actually even in that sadness, because it's when we're in those moments that I think it touches on stuff that we've gone over in the past. In those vulnerable moments, I think people are as authentic and genuine as they can be. That you're kind of stripped away from all of the masks we put on, all of the walls we build up around ourselves, and there's a really raw experience. And so even in those times of sadness, even though it would be better if I were to be able to say to somebody like, hey, you just want me to heal your family member? Oh yeah. Boom, they're healed. They would prefer that. In my experience, there's still a joy felt between us in that we're not alone, of just that physical presence, of being there with somebody. And there's a lot of time, I think this probably goes to it as well. And I would assume this has to happen for everybody. Obviously, we're talking as two pastors, so our scope of knowledge and experience is limited just to what we've experienced. But I'm hoping that this applies to everybody, that there have been times in my life, and I would apply this, we kind of joked about it earlier before we started filming. There are times in our lives where we are bringing joy to somebody else that for us, we're not even realizing we're doing it. Mm-hmm. Like we're not even consciously going like, I'm going to make this person happy, or I'm going to make them feel better. But maybe it's just in our presence. Maybe we say something that, isn't even necessarily intended to make a difference. We don't think we're making a difference. And I know as a pastor, there's been various times in my ministry where somebody has come up to me and said, hey, remember when you said this? And I'll respond, no,
No,
I
yeah.
do not. But where they'll say like, you said this, or you were there, like you just happened to show up at this place, or you happened to say this in your sermon, and there's no way you could have known this was happening in my life at that time. And I know you probably didn't even mean it for that, but it connected to me. And so I think, one, that brings me joy too. And this is going to sound very pastory. And so if you want to bring it back down to earth, feel free to. But what was coming to me when you were sharing recently is in those moments, like in those humbling moments, just like when someone says, oh, this happened, you were a part of this and I don't realize it. For me, those are the moments where I'm like, okay, this stuff is all real. Like God is actually, like, I believe God is real, but these are the moments, there are moments where I can't explain things, and it's in those moments, I'm not talking about miracles and different, stuff like that, but those moments where the Holy Spirit, where God was working in those moments and
Yeah.
in reflection in very, very real ways, because they go beyond me, they go beyond you. And we've each had hardship in our lives, and I won't go into it, definitely not in this video, but there was even a time for a while, I was actually reflecting on this in the last couple of days. I don't know why, where Pastor Andrew and I, for like 4 months or so, we were not really talking to each other that much when we were in seminary, but we had been really close, and then we weren't, and then somebody had to bring us back. So maybe I'll tell them about it after we're done recording. But so we've all experienced sad things, hard things in our lives, and we can think of those people and those things that helped bring us from like the brink of sadness and despair. And I think those are the joy moments. And I think recognizing and seeing God in those moments is a special thing too. To think that, I know I preach this and I teach this, but I don't always think it. To think that God is actually working through me is an amazing idea.
Yeah.
And it's a humbling thing too. So when we're in those joy moments, how do you approach that within yourself at times? And I'll give you like a little preface to this. How do you approach this within yourself sometimes when joy is something that is a little bit further from you? So I've had some sad, some really dark, depressing times, even in ministry. And I will say, most recently when I was going through some stuff, it was Pastor Andrew and another one of our friends, another one of our colleagues from seminary, that my wife was like, you need to reach out to them, because you need to tell them what's going on and open up, because I can't help you with this. They'll have an understanding of it. And I reached out, and had I not done that, I don't know where I'd be right now. But realizing that finding joy, as you've already stated, is it's about those connections and those relationships. So what I'm turning to, and I realize I'm rambling, it's because another thought came in my head, but when that joy is a little bit further away from you, how do you recognize and realize, like, I have to do something, because I'm not in a good place now? And so the preface I'll give to it is, my whole family, but I've dealt with anxiety and depression. I'm on different medication to help with that. I've gone to counseling to help with that. And I know sometimes those are like negative things, and people don't want to hear that, especially, your pastor had to go to counseling. Like, you're supposed to be the one who's always got stuff together, are there productive or constructive ways that, if you felt that you were down, like, what are there certain steps you take to say, like, all right, I need help getting out of this place, and I know I can't do it by myself? Like, and if you say no, that's fine too.
I think just in general, I mean, when you're in a down place, a person, when one is in a down place, I mean, it's hard to see past that. I mean, I've been there too.
Yeah.
So, and just in general, I mean, when you're in that place, that's really the step I think that anyone would need to take is to say, I can't, and it's really hard to do this too. I can't see anything other than this.
Yeah.
And you just need kind of that outside perspective. I mean, you were talking about contacting me and our colleague, and because there's so many things, that outside, in a sense, view can be like, hey, but what about this? We need like that reminder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what a blessing if we have a significant other that helps us to try and see that, or a friend, or sometimes it's the person in the grocery store that's that's like, hey, how you doing, or like seeing a parishioner in the store, and they're just like, oh, hey,
How'd
it's
you
really
get out of the church?
yeah. Oh, it's like seeing your teacher at the store. You're like, wait, you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
But just kind of that outside perspective. But it's so hard, I know, when you're in that place, especially when you're like, gosh, I wish, what is there to be joyful about? What is there that can maybe lift me out of this? And it's hard. It's like I said, it's hard to see outside of that, because I mean, your vision is like this.
Yeah.
And to be like, I need to say something to someone, or let me reach out. Yeah. I mean, even as pastors, I mean, we're taught that in, well, kind of in seminary, and it's like, yeah, this is what you need to do in our continuing education, in all of that. It's like, this is what you need to do. But I mean, kind of going, self-care, and then going along with what you were saying, oh, well, your pastor needs counseling. Of course your pastor needs counseling. Counselors need counselors, because because you get, and I'm sure this happens to other people, you get in the mode, or what have you, of if someone came to you and they're like, oh yeah, I'm really down, and you give them that care, pastoral care, talking with them. Yeah. But then when it's you can't see it.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and I think because this is what I like to think that I do it too, but I going off what I've received from you. So I'll use that, I received from you and from another colleague. And I think this is very biblical in a Jobian sense, of what didn't happen is in Job, that, so if anybody's experiencing this, know that you're not alone. When I was having
that's it right
not
there.
Alone, yeah.
Remember, you're not alone.
We'll hold on to that. Yeah. So no, you're fine. So when I reached out to Andrew and to our other friend, the response wasn't, hey, have some joy, be happy. Life's not bad. Think of all the great things in your life. I mean, it eventually, it moved its way towards, those things, where I could, to be able to start to show me the joy once again. But the initial joy was in that sadness, which I think also goes with the Martin Luther quote that I talked about earlier, is that, when I first reached out, the response was, and pastors talk like this, but I'll make it cleaner. The response was, yeah, that sucks. That's horrible. And it was just like an acknowledgement of the place where I was. It wasn't like, all right, let me get you out of there right away. It was your opinion, your feelings are valued. And even where you're at, you have a right to be where you're at mentally and emotionally right now. And it wasn't that Andrew and our other friend, Lauren, that they wanted me to stay in that place. But that first part of not being alone is, hey, if you need us to just be upset while you're upset, we'll be upset with you. We'll have that common foundation of, the world is not right now. This is God is not happy with this. This is not God's doing. And then from there moved over time, to a better place. So I would say, that was crucial for me, because if I would have reached out to Andrew and to Lauren and shared what was going on in my life, and if they would have said, suck it up, or like, we all have problems, or something like that, or tried to one up me, like, well, you think that's bad, it wouldn't have been helpful. It was in that and maybe this is where joy can go to another level. They were able to hold on to their joy and move into a place of darkness so they could be there with me, so that eventually we could all walk out together, and that's, I think that's, looking back on it, at the time, I was not joyful. I was anything but joyful, but that was like those were like some of the first glimpses of light that I was able to experience and feel at that time. And that can't be overstated. That was very real. So maybe kind of going along with what you're saying is part of experiencing joy is that allowing others to be there with you and allow others to help you see it and to help you, to give you your self-worth when you don't feel like you have any.
And, as we're talking, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is all of it really revolves around how we define joy.
Mm-hmm.
Joy, the more I think about it, joy is one of those words that's constantly in our minds, I think, evolving. Well, what does that mean? Someone says I'm joyful. Well, does that mean I'm just happy all the time? Does that, what does that mean? And I think as we're talking, joy, like finding joy in the darkness, or being joyful in darkness. What does that mean? Because, I think of that situation, and it's like it brought joy to me to be there for you. And then to, because of course the thing, you talk to someone with anxiety, depression, someone that's down, I think one of the worst things to say to them is like, well, just be happy. I mean, how helpful is that? Even if you don't understand, to just simply say, how can I be here with you? Or how can I be there with you? Even if you don't understand, and say that, be like, I don't understand what you're feeling, but I'm here.
I care about you, and I want to be here for you. And I think go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I think that can be, without giving away, going too much behind the curtain, for me, that was extremely, as I mentioned, that was extremely beneficial for me. And then there's been vice versa, flip times where Andrew or our other friend might come to me and say, hey, this is really a bad thing going on. And I'm able to, to reciprocate and say, hey, so like we'll joke, and hopefully Andrew won't yell at me for this, but we joke and we make fun of each other and we tease each other, but there's like a certain unwritten rule, where it's like we can make fun of each other, but if we start making fun of ourselves too much, the other ones are like, hey, I'm allowed to make fun of you, but you don't talk like that about yourself, and that's that can be something too. Like if we haven't heard from one another in a while, just sending a quick meme, or just like a little like, hey, thinking of you, but not said in that happy of a way. Like, where are you at, loser? Something. Like I said, joy can look a lot of different ways. And I will say, like, I could be having a bad time, or I could have had a bad experience, and all of a sudden I get a text message, from someone, or to say I get text messages from Andrew, and it says something funny, and he doesn't know that I was having a bad day, and like I'm like, oh my gosh, that just brought a smile to my face, and it brought me something that I didn't have 30 seconds ago before I opened it up. And other times he sends me stuff that's truly horrible, and it's usually from Lauren, and I won't play the videos he sends anymore. But the point of that being that, I think, to kind of sum it all up, wrap it all up, for me, I think joy has to be something that we are open to, that we are actively pursuing, and sometimes we only find it, one, after it's gone, we go, wow, that was a really good time. Or two, we find it when we're able to give to others. We're able to give part of ourself away. But it's not, joy is not a given. It's not like, well, you're baptized, you're a Christian, you're saved, you're this or that, your life, too blessed to be stressed. Like I've never had that shirt that says too blessed to be stressed, because then I'm like, man, I must not be that blessed, even though I know I am, because I certainly am stressed. So yeah, I think for me personally, it's one of allowing myself to feel joy, allow myself to feel sadness too when I feel it, but then knowing where to go, knowing where my outlets are if I would need to find joy if I'm low on it, and then also being, really appreciating the moments where I've got to had the opportunity to participate in joy with somebody else and say, I know that was kind of meant for them, kind of like what you said, it was meant for them, but I feel better being able to be a part of that and being able to help. So that'll be my love you.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I love you too, but that was my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think another thing to hear is it's okay if, you don't need to be joyful all the time or experience that, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of that, it just really comes back to those connections with other people. And yeah, because, it's easy. Like, we started this conversation however long ago, I don't know, like 3 hours. And
3.5. Yeah.
yeah. And, even just sitting here, I'm thinking of things to be joyful about. My
Yeah.
teenagers actually wanting to come talk to me.
Yeah.
And they might come talk to me about nothing. And
Yeah.
but how wonderful it is just to sit there and listen to them talk about nothing.
Yeah. And I will encourage people, and it might be a little bit different or difficult with the situations we're finding ourselves in right now. Yeah. That's why we say, like, in these posts or in other things that we put out on Facebook individually, through our churches together. I've never, how do I say this? Because it's going to come out like a double negative. All right. So I'm going to flip that around. Every time I've received just a little note from somebody, whether it was a card, whether it was an email, whether it was like a Facebook comment or whatever, from somebody that just said, hey, I want to say thank you for being this. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for being my pastor. Thank you for being my friend. Those little things, encouragement to one another in the congregation as well. Be encouraged to share those moments of joy with other people, because as blessed as we are, and I truly believe that, as blessed as we are, in church, a lot of times I focused more on sin and salvation, end of life, let's say, than I have focused on the here and now and the abundant life that happens, in between those moments. So really taking the time, and as Pastor Andrew said in previous videos and individually to me, worship being a celebration, our lives trying to be a celebration. Is it always going to be the best party ever? No. But, put those good things out there. And that'll make a difference in other people's lives in ways you don't realize at the time.
If you're that person, then tell somebody about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, I'm not feeling the party.
Yeah. And another person will be like, really? Let me help. How can we help? How can we be there?
I wonder.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, because that's what I'm constantly preaching, to the point where, well, the last time I preached it and we were all together at a congregation, I'm like, this is the party. I only got I got 2 or 3 eye rolls, like, oh, that again. But they, they're like, yeah, that. Sitting here thinking, if someone in the congregation was just like, hey, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not feeling the party. They know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they would respond to be like, yeah, what's going on?
Yeah. And that's awesome. Because it's kind of like, I relate that to, my mom repeatedly. My mom is very, we would say, I don't know if this is an Ohio thing or not, very lovey-dovey. All right. So she's, so she's told me she's loved me 8 million times since I was born, 41 years ago. And to the point where, she would tell me growing up, or I'd be like, Mom, I know, but it doesn't mean that anytime she ever told me deep down that I wasn't like, that's awesome. I might roll my eyes and I'd be like, yeah, oh, we hear this again. But, as a parent now, I can never tell my kids too many times I love them. Like, it's, for me, maybe it's a selfish thing for me, but I don't feel like I can never tell them enough. And so talking about the party, talking about the joy, and I think maybe talking about that and being intentional about it, because there's enough other crap and garbage in the world that we need those. We need to hear those positive things. because we're gonna, whether we want to or not, we're gonna experience the negative. So we need those positive things to help us
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about that. I'm going to share a story now that I know he remembers. I don't think we talked about it on here before. And if I did, that I don't care because it makes me joyful. My wife likes to reference this story to me whenever I try to claim I have any type of knowledge over any type of things that stereotypically men should know. So back in seminary, I try to do my wife a favor. And it was starting to get cold out. It was getting into winter. And we had, I had my wife's car, and I was like, oh, I want to do a favor. I want to make sure I saw this thing where it was like, you can get windshield wiper fluid that like cuts through ice. And we were in Columbus, Ohio, and so it snowed and got cold there. And I said, Pastor Andrew remembers this. So I went to like an AutoZone or something like that, and I got this de-icing, what I read to be de-icing. Hey,
Yeah.
tell him I
Yeah.
love him. Tell him I love him. Tell him Jeff loves you.
Yeah, I will.
Right. So I went and got the stuff that I read on the label because I'm not somebody who pays attention to detail, like de-icing windshield wiper fluid for my wife for her car. And I got it home. I opened up the hood, opened up the reservoir. I poured a whole bunch of this de-icing stuff right in the windshield wiper fluid. Tell my wife about it. I'm super excited. And she says, wait, what did you put into it? And so I told him, like, the bottle's under the, in the cabinet under the sink, whatever. But I went and got it. I saw this thing, and I was just like, I have to get it for your car. And she looked at it and she goes, you idiot, you put antifreeze in the windshield wiper fluid. So I don't know much about cars. However, I did find out that day that you're not supposed to put antifreeze in windshield wiper fluid. I actually don't know what would have happened. But so this is how good of a friend Andrew is. I told him about this. I think we went and got real wiper fluid. It's nighttime at this point. We came back to our parking lot, and he spent a good 30 to 40 minutes helping, as I think he was inside the car, or I don't remember who was, pulling the stuff because we had to empty out the reservoir, shooting antifreeze onto the windshield of my car, and then helping also scrape it off because it's like freezing at this time and snow and slush is everywhere. And so I got to look like a complete and total moron while doing this. And he spent a good 30 or 40 minutes helping me clean it off my car. And so whenever we see windshield wiper
disposed
fluid,
of it correctly. Let's put that in there.
Did we?
Yes.
What did we do?
Well, we had it in the snow, and then we took the snow and we put it somewhere. Maybe that wasn't correctly, but it didn't get into the.
No, it didn't get
ground.
into like the water. Yeah, it didn't get into like the sewer system of water. I mean, it might have eventually, but it didn't initially. So yeah. So it took 30, 40 minutes, and anytime I'm with my kids and my wife, and we're anywhere near where they have windshield wiper fluid, my wife tells the story again and again to my kids about how dumb I am for putting antifreeze in windshield wiper fluid containers. Yeah. So that was my story.
All right. Very good.
Did a good job. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank Pastor Jeff once again for talking through another topic. And again, if you're able to leave comments and emails to us as we post this, and if you have any thoughts on topics, just let us know. Thank you. All right.
The number you have dialed has been changed. The new number is, please note, the new number is